All right, Sam. I want to start by just saying real quick, thank you for sitting down with me today for your oral history. I really do appreciate that. We're going to just start off with some very basic biographical information. Just talk a little bit about your parents, who they were, any brothers and sisters you may have, and then obviously where were you born. So, without any further ado.
All right. So, my name is Samuel Gray. Born and raised to Georgie Gray and Charles Gray. Father is deceased now, but they divorced when I was about 9 years old. So anyway, so somewhat of a relationship with my father, and have 6 other brothers and sisters. One older sister, then I'm next, and everybody else is under me. Have one brother that followed my career, my youngest brother, actually second to the youngest brother that followed my career in the Navy. And so it was cool to be able to, support him through his training, because he went to San Diego for boot camp. So I was in San Diego at the time, so to be able to follow his career in boot camp, go to his graduation, and we ended up on the same base, so that was pretty cool to be able to experience that together with my second to the youngest brother. And then from there, that's it.
Did your dad serve at all?
No, he did not serve. Out of all of my family, my dad was the only one that didn't serve. So uncles, all of my uncles on both sides of my family have all have served in all branches of the service.
Okay.
Matter of fact, the one I was closest to was in the one that influenced my decision to go into the Navy, because he was in the Navy. So.
And when did you join the Navy?
I joined in the summer after my 11th grade and went into what they call the late entry program in '77, and actually went active duty in '78, June of '78.
How was it growing up during Vietnam?
To be quite honest, I wasn't even focused on war and all that kind of stuff. I heard about it, heard about people being drafted and that kind of thing, and since '74, when that war actually came to an end, at least of what I believe, then we weren't required to go register and all that kind of stuff. So it was all at that point voluntary.
So then, would you say it was the family tradition of being in the service that had you join at 17? Or what was the reason, do you think, you enlisted at 17?
I believe that it was because of the uncle that I was close to. He was, and like I said, I've seen all of their military pictures and knew that all of them, served. I've seen them in their uniforms and all that kind of stuff. So basically, it's just a family, history of being in the service. And so at the time, I didn't even think that, that this would be a career and that kind of stuff, but quickly it became a career decision to stay in, to make a career out of it.
What made you select the Navy versus any of the other ones?
Yep. So my dad's brother, his name is George Gray, because we spent a lot of time with him. Because again, my family divorced, my mom and dad divorced, and he was the one that was closest to me. And so because of him, he didn't say join the service or anything like that, but because seeing all the photographs and all that kind of stuff, and I knew from high school even that I didn't want to go to college at the time. I didn't think I was ready. I didn't, you hear about all the financial things about college and that kind of stuff. And so I just felt like at that point that the service is a real viable choice, for for me to go in, and that I could get a career. In talking to my recruiter, I felt like my recruiter was real with me too, and it wasn't just about quotas and that kind of stuff, that he actually really explained everything. So I went in designated as with a designated school, technical school. And so he wasn't just, pulling my leg and it wasn't about quotas, for him. So.
Well, what was your MOS or your initial MOS?
Yeah, so my MOS was aviation mechanic structures, which they call it aviation structural mechanic. And so I got a chance to learn about aircraft maintenance and all about hydraulic systems, structures of the aircraft, emergency seats, and that kind of thing in that career field.
Was that an MOS you wanted?
I knew that I was a woodworker. We still had that kind of stuff in high school where we could do wood shop, and I was really good at it. So what I qualified for, and what we talked about as far as fields to go into, when I look up descriptions and that kind of stuff, that one fit me best. And I was interested in it too. So you got a chance to work on airplanes. I mean, that was, small town boy from Battle Creek working on airplanes. I just thought that was pretty cool. So.
How did your family feel about your early enlistment and your enlistment in general, for that matter?
Well, actually, my mom had to sign off, on my paperwork to go in because of the late entry program. So she was okay with it, and I'm sure my uncle had something to do with it too, maybe reassuring her, that things would be cool or things would be okay. Again, Vietnam War was over because I enlisted 4 years after, that. So I wasn't going into a war setting, right off the bat, not like some of the kids that are going in now. They're going in and, and going right into battle, so.
So where is Navy boot camp, and then how exactly did you get to that place? Because I'm guessing it's not here at Battle Creek.
No. Actually, in the Navy, there was 3 boot camps. One was in Great Lakes, one was in San Diego, one of them was in Orlando, Florida. But when they decided to single site boot camp, the one where I was at decommissioned in San Diego, because I was the drill instructor or company commander, or what they call a divisional commander is what they changed the name to. So that one decommissioned, so I had a year and a half of pushing boots in San Diego before they closed it, and then the one in Orlando closed as well. So they wanted everybody to go to Great Lakes, Illinois, to the one in Chicago, or Great Lakes. And so at the time, I was married and children, and so my wife at the time said she didn't want to move to the East Coast. So then that's when I wound up up northern California in an area called Point Mugu. It's a Naval Air Weapons Station. So I transferred from San Diego to Point Mugu.
Okay. But when you entered the Navy, you had to go to boot camp, correct?
Yeah.
And which one?
I went to Great Lakes.
Great Lakes?
Yeah.
How did you get to Great Lakes?
I actually can't tell you why. It's just one of the ones that was available at the time, and that's where I went to.
Okay.
My brother ended up in San Diego boot camp, and I can't tell you why. So from the East Coast, he went to West Coast to boot camp, and so I just luck of the draw, I guess. I don't know what the mentality was of the people, detailers or whoever at the time, why I wound up in Great Lakes. and he wound up in San Diego, or neither one of us went to Orlando. So
Now, obviously, going to boot camp, I'm sure you had your own thought as to what you were going to experience. Is that what boot camp was like, or what was boot camp for you?
actually, I played football in high school, and we had some really hardcore coaches. So to me, boot camp was a piece of cake, um, because again, I was fit, athletic, and that kind of stuff. So the things that boot camp, the rigors of boot camp didn't really bother me, and I was accustomed to following orders. I called my mom my first drill instructor because she had some strict rules, 6 of us, and she's the only one raising us. So, she was like, be in the house when the street lights come on, and she expected certain things out of us. We had chores, you had to get those chores done. So, so following orders was really not an issue, for me. And we were taught to respect, adults and that kind of thing. So boot camp, again, physically, mentally, was not that tough for me.
How long did boot camp last?
8.5 weeks. Yeah.
What was maybe the toughest part then, would you say? Was there a tough part? I mean, I know you just talked about your mom.
I think that, again, having a recruiter that was, really prepared you for what you were going to experience. So maybe watching films that he had, of boot camp, talking about his A school that he went to and what that was about. So I think having a really great recruiter, somebody that you really believed in and that kind of stuff. Now, being a company commander or a drill instructor, I've had recruits come in that were, well, my recruiter told me, I could be a SEAL, I could be this. And it's like, recruit, you gotta graduate boot camp first, you gotta get through this first, And they were thinking that as soon as they came in that they were gonna, be assigned this or that. So then at that point you knew that they were just trying to pump their numbers up, their quotas up, because they didn't tell them, what was the real deal,
So having that light shine on that whole experience kind of made it so it wasn't difficult. You kind of knew what was kind of coming at you and what you had to do and what was coming. Yeah.
And like I said, having coaches, football coaches, and they were more tough on me than my company commanders were, And I didn't have a problem following orders. As a matter of fact, because I followed orders so well, I got positions in companies that other people did not, So I was like the master at arms in our company. I was a squad leader in our company, So I graduated the second highest level as far as grades and that kind of stuff out of my company. And so, it was a piece of cake for me, I thought.
You mentioned A school. What is an A school?
Yeah, so they have different school levels, technical levels. So A school is like the basics. Then you have a C school or B school. So it's a different level of like aircraft maintenance. You have different levels of aircraft maintenance. You have organizational level maintenance where you're doing some basic part removals and stuff like that. And then the second level would be you are taking those parts that we pull out of aircraft, you're taking those parts apart and fixing those and putting those back together. And then where the C level training is where they take the part that the B level can't fix and maybe go a little deeper in repairing that part. And so that's the same thing with the A school. A school is like your basic, and then your C schools are more technical, where they get deeper into the technical aspects of whatever rating you're in.
Okay. So for you, where did you go then? Because obviously, I'm guessing you went to B school next after basic.
So after basic, I went to my A school,
Okay.
and that A school was in Memphis, Tennessee, or actually it was Millington, Tennessee at the time, Millington, and from there, you go to school. That was your focus, so go to school, and I did extremely well in school too, and graduated second out of my class of airframers is what we call them, and that actually helped out because I got promoted like accelerated advance from my A school because of how well I did. So I didn't have to stay. So basically, I went from boot camp, got accelerated advance, and from A school, got accelerated advance. So all I had to do was wait like 6 months, and I was E4 very quickly.
Yeah. That probably makes it a little bit easier too, getting into the fleet, getting that higher rank a little bit quicker, than that, for sure.
It gives you more responsibility, obviously.
Yeah.
You know,
Better pay.
better pay,
Yeah.
but better pay, more responsibility.
So, how long was your A school?
My A school was 2 months long.
Okay, 8 weeks. And then from A school, were you sent to your, do they call it permanent duty station or your actual?
Yep. And so another one of those fortunate things I was talking about earlier was from A school, because where I was at in my training, the level that I was able to attain, or the grade that I was able to attain, I was able to pick my orders. So I picked San Diego, and it was San Diego shore duty. So I was able to pick it, and I actually got it, and I couldn't believe it because there were other people that got, other assignments and that kind of stuff. And one of my very best friends from A school, he got San Diego as well, and so we became roommates in San Diego. So,
Do you have any memories or vivid memories of your time in training, either basic training or your A school, that stand out?
the only one that I can think about is I really got close to God. And my religion really was calming for me, but just really getting closer to God and my decision to serve God. So that was my memory of that. But again, going through boot camp, I felt like was just a really piece of cake because of my athletic and my coaches being the ones that were really hard on us. You better not lose a game, and if you lost a game, when I say lose a game, if you lost a game because the team was like way better than you, but if you lost a game because of mistakes and things like that, then it was really hard on you.
Mm-hmm.
So, you don't have that no more in sports.
You mentioned shore duty. Could you maybe explain what it was, and then just maybe while you're doing that, take us through like your first 4 years, what a daily job, what your daily workload looked like, or what you could expect?
Yeah. So when I hit San Diego, I was assigned to what they call the line division. The line division is where you prepare the aircraft for flight. So we would look at the flight schedule and whatever the flight schedule warranted for that day. These are the airplanes we're going to use. So you basically went out, checked tire pressures, you checked hydraulic, fluid levels, you basically doing a checkup on the airplane to make sure that everything functioned in the aircraft prior to the pilot, flying the airplane. So basically, you did all the check over the structure of the aircraft, made sure all the screws and all that were in place, and there weren't any obvious cracks or anything like that. And then, like I said, tire pressures, pneumatic pressures, hydraulic fluid levels, and that kind of stuff was where they should be for the aircraft. So that was the line division. From the line division, I got moved to the airframe shop, where now I'm working in my designated rate and working on the structures of the aircraft, which we would do. Basically, our maintenance program would be, just routine maintenance on the aircraft. If the aircraft came back and something didn't work, or they discovered some problems with the aircraft, we would work on those parts of the aircraft and that kind of stuff again to get the aircraft ready, for flight. And that's where I really got my first shot at leading a work center with the airframe shop. I was able to run we had 3 different shifts: day shift, night shift, and mid shift. So I ran the mid shift. And again, it was all getting the aircraft ready for flight. So.
Mm-hmm. Now, as your first 4 years in the Navy is coming to a close, it's now what, 82, I think, right? Roughly. Was part of what maybe put you to re-enlist was the status quo of where the economy was? Because I know at that time that was right in the middle of Reaganomics, and the economy wasn't at its most stable point. So you were like, hey, I got a job here in the Navy, and then I'm going to stay for another 4? Or were you already committed at that point, at that 4 years, because of what you've already done? You're like, I want to be here for life.
Oh, yeah. Like I said, my decision to make the Navy a career came relatively quick because, like I said, my first 4 years of the service was shore duty, and so my decision to stay or make a career, it had nothing to do with the economy. Okay. It just had to do with my love for working on aircraft and doing what I was doing. I really enjoyed working on the aircraft that I worked on, and it was F-14s, Tomcats is what I worked on, and I really enjoyed what I did, and I was really good at it. So, that was the thing that motivated me to stay, in the service and make it a career, because I really enjoyed what I did, and really what it was about, and what we did was really important.
For sure. Enlistment 2, where does that start?
So enlistment 2 started, like you just said, in '82. I went to a squadron called VF2, which is called VF2 Bounty Hunters is what their nickname is, but it's another F-14 squadron in NAS Miramar. It's a naval air station, and at this naval air station they had seagoing squadrons, and they had shore duty billets or jobs, all right? And so basically when I transferred from my shore duty squadron, which is the FRAM squadron that I said, the Fleet Readiness Squadron, and then transferred just up the street to a seagoing squadron, which is VF2, which is my first aircraft, or first sea duty. So basically we all knew what we were, doing, and at that point I was in charge of our airframe shop, and went in there, was the leading petty officer in that shop, and so ran that shop for that space of time that I was there, and that's when I've been I just call it luck or whatever, but for the space of time, my first sea duty assignment was VF2, and the ports that we pulled in, we probably max spent about 55 days, the whole cruise at sea. and that's counting the whole time. When we were in a port, it just seemed like, we were always in port. And so that was very fortunate to experience something like that because, again, that didn't happen later on, in the cruises that I went on, where you would spend 55 days at sea, in one time. And that's when they would throw in what they called still beaches, where you would shut down flight ops and
You get one beer.
and you get the one beer. Actually, there's two.
Oh,
you got two tickets.
Yeah.
So you had the 2 beers, and and so they would shut down, and it was a day where people could just really decompress and that kind of stuff. And so, but yeah, those at sea periods for those long extended periods of time, you had to have those kinds of those kinds of days, where people could just relax and not be.
What was the name of that ship that you were on?
So my very first ship was the USS Enterprise. We call it the Big E, and so it's a nuclear powered carrier, and it's got quite the history behind it, being the first nuclear powered carrier, and so it was pretty impressive, to be on that ship.
Did it just leave you in awe? I'm sure it probably did when you first saw it.
It did.
Yeah.
Because we had to fly up to Alameda, California, where it was docked, and then once we went aboard, I mean, just how massive this ship is. It really does kind of take your breath away, because you're like, dang, I'm going to get lost. It was just so real, how massive this ship is, and I never saw anything like that in my life.
For me, my comparison was when we deploy on a MEU, you have a flat top, which is just for vertical launch or whatever capable planes. And I remember that pulling alongside, I don't know which one of the nuclear carriers, and it just made it look like a baby carrier.
Yeah.
It looked like a little tiny baby carrier out there, and I was like, wow.
Yeah.
I can only imagine if you're an enemy of the United States and that shows up on your horizon,
Yeah. And so at that time we flew our airplanes up to Alameda, and then we craned them all aboard the aircraft. Subsequently, in other deployments, they would fly aboard, trap, and then we would park them and put them down in the hangar, the lower hangar, just to make space, for the others that was flying aboard.
not sure if you can disclose this, but roughly how many planes were on board?
Yeah, so each squadron, I'll say F-14 squadrons, we had 12 aircraft that we would deploy with. So you had your squadron, you had your sister squadron, so that was 24 F-14s that was on the aircraft. Then you had EA-6Bs, which were intruders. You had S-3s, which were the sea prowlers that were sonar detection, where you could find submarines. Then you had 2 squadrons of each one of those. So you had a squadron and a sister squadron. EA-6B, you had a squadron and a sister squadron. And then you had E-2C Hawkeye type aircraft, where they have about four of those on the aircraft, and you had your squadron and your sister squadron. Then you had, of course, helicopters as well, which were your search and rescue, aircraft that would also do hunt for subs and that kind of stuff too. So.
You're still did the Cold War at this time. Did you ever have any close encounters, do you know of, with the Russians?
Oh yeah. So we would have those encounters. What they would do was their aircraft, which is called a Soviet Bear, which is this really huge, bomber type aircraft. So when the radar would pick them up, we would launch, aircraft, and they would be escorts, for them. So they would do these escort missions, or in some cases, I've never heard of one so far, but the whole time I was in the service, where they would do these suicide missions, where if you saw a door open, a bomb bay door open, that they were designed to fly the aircraft, you know, up inside that aircraft to destroy it, you know. So those are things that we heard about that could happen if they got close enough, and if you saw the, you know, there's no problem for them to fly by, but they would always have an escort flying with them and looking up to make sure a door didn't open or whatever, and then, you know, like I said, if it did, you know, their mission was to just,
Yeah.
you know, so, yeah.
So 86, you're rapidly approaching your next enlistment, your third enlistment at this point. Where did that one take you?
So that one took me to what's called a training group. It's a Naval Air Maintenance Training Group. It's NAMTRADET is what it's called, it's a training detachment. And so now I'm training students on flight controls, how to rig flight controls, and we had all these trainers in this detachment where we would show, you know, students how to work on that aircraft.
Did you ever go out to sea during that third?
So we go sea duty or whichever, whatever you get assigned. So we'll go sea duty, shore duty, sea duty, shore duty. So now I'm coming off of sea duty and I went back to shore duty. So during that shore duty detachment, actually went right back to the base that I was at, NAS Miramar, and they have this training group there, the Naval Air Maintenance Training Group. And so that's where we would again train on all of the aspects of the aircraft, where these folks would send, like I said, it was a training squadron. I went to that FRAMP squadron initially, but now this one taught you, you know, how to work on that aircraft and taught you all the intricate little details of maintenance on the aircraft. So we would talk about all the hydraulic systems and have static displays or displays on, you know, actually with the F-14, because it swept wings, it had a sweep ring. The swing swept out and swept back. So we had a trainer that would show recruits on how to, would show students how to rig that that flight control. Mm-hmm. So from the spoilers to the ailerons and elevators and rudders and all that kind of stuff on how to work on that equipment, how to troubleshoot it and blah, blah, blah.
And how long were you at that station?
So from there, that was another 3 years of the training squadron, or the training group, or detachment, and then 3 years there, and then went back to the fleet, where I went to what they call VF 213, which is another F-14 squadron.
Okay, and that's putting us right around Desert Storm then, right?
Yes.
Okay. And that, so before we get into Desert Storm, you'd have been on how many other ships? Just the one? Just Eisenhower, or had you been on
the Enterprise?
Or the Enterprise?
And then from the Enterprise to that training group, and then now I'm on the USS Ranger.
So you have turnover.
Which was a conventional carrier. It wasn't nuclear powered, but it was conventional.
The little baby carrier.
Yeah, I wouldn't say it was baby, because it's still massive. You know, it wasn't big as the Enterprise.
No, I bring that up just because, like, there's turnover, right? Like, you're getting moved around, you're going to different places, but it's not not that you don't get to get your feet adjusted underneath you and you get to land on your feet. You're there for 3 years. You get to establish a routine. If you had family, you had kids or something like that, they could go to school, make friends. Like, it's not like every 6 months you're moving to another place, you're going all over the country, you're deploying, coming back, going back. Like, some stories out there.
Which was a great part about this one because, detours wasn't about trying to transfer you here, transfer your PCSU across the country and that kind of stuff when the Navy could save money and just move you from one base to the other base, which was San Diego, or when I got detailed up to Point Magoo, which was the northern part of California. All right, so so you weren't PCSing across country. Now you have to move your family and all that kind of stuff and blah, blah, blah. And there's more to it to PCS your family across country. So the Navy could save money that way, so by doing things that way. As much as I wanted to PCS across country, it would never happen.
So before you went to Desert Storm and all of that, what was your favorite limo or your point that you got to be free outside of the United States? What was your favorite place to visit?
So like I said, my very first cruise, we were always in a port, it seemed like. So leaving San Diego, stopping in Hawaii, from Hawaii to the Philippines, from the Philippines and just go around to Singapore, Korea, Busan, Korea, to Mombasa, Africa, even to the little dinky little island which we were on station in the Indian Ocean. Once we hit the Indian Ocean, coming out of Singapore and the Straits of Malacca, so coming out of there into on station the Indian Ocean, that was our operating area. So that's normally where we would operate. So that little island called Diego Garcia, we were able to get off the boat, and all of us couldn't get off the ship and go into Diego Garcia because it's a very small little island. So they couldn't get everybody off the ship. So we would come off in duty stations. So if you were in duty station, it was four duty stations. So duty station 1 would be able to depart and go ashore and then come back, and then they would just shift us like that. So from Diego Garcia to Mombasa, Africa, from Africa, once we were done with our on-station time, which again, that whole cruise was about 55 days just being out on the water, all right, from the time we left port, because we were always in a port. So from Mombasa, Africa, went down to Australia, from Perth to Sydney to Tasmania, and then from Tasmania back up to, I think we hit the Philippines one more time, and then came back across to Hawaii, where we would do what they call Tiger cruises, where part of the squadron would fly home to prepare our squadron spaces and everything like that for us to come back, which would create space for civilian dads and uncles and that to ride the ship from Hawaii back to home port, which is pretty cool, because then those dads and sons and uncles, would be able to experience, what being on a ship was like, and that, and it's a really nice PR piece too, So they would do air shows, and all that kind of stuff while you were at sea, and so.
Did you get shellback while you were out there?
Oh yeah, I did that.
Can you go into that a little bit?
Yeah, so basically, so you would cross the equator. So from there, it was, So you were a polywog, all right, is what they call it. It's a long Navy tradition, that when you cross the equator, that you would go through this initiation. So everybody that was not a shellback were wogs, polywogs. So you would go through this initiation where you would do some things that you would normally do, and they'd have these fire hoses that they would wog, to pat you on the butt, kind of like to keep you moving, and you're on your hands and knees the whole time. And then you had to crawl through this engine container that would hold an engine. The engine obviously wasn't in it, but they would fill this thing up with all this nasty stuff, maybe the food from the galley, and it would just look awful. And so you would have to jump into it, swim across the other side, and then they would look at you and say, "What are you?" And if you said you were a wog, then they'd make you go back through again, because the proper response would be, "I'm a shellback." You've been saying this wog, 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 all through this initiation, and if you didn't get it right when you came out the other end, because some people didn't know that was the end, you had to dive through that, so it would be from here to that end of the table, you'd have to, go through this crap, all right? And so it's just a fun day again to decompress, and I guess if you felt like when you were going through, you didn't feel like you were decompressing, but yeah. So it's just a time-honored tradition.
Was there any other ceremonies you may have participated with the Navy in?
Yep. So you had the shellback, then you had a golden shellback. Golden shellback is crossing the international date line. So that's another one, golden shellback, and that's just another level. Now people, you got shellback, then you got a golden shellback. So as a chief petty officer, when you changed uniforms, that was another initiation that you went to. Again, time-honored initiation where you were, we call it tested, initiated, and accepted, into that rank. Because now, again, you totally got out of the type of uniform you were wearing into a khaki uniform. And again, a whole bunch of other duties and responsibilities as an E7, coming out of the service. And that's what I got out as an E7.
All right, let's get into Desert Storm a little bit. Just where were you when it started, and then walk us through what is it that you were kind of doing over there.
So still in VF 213 at the time. So we came back off of deployment, and that's when that war ramped up. So our turnaround period, typically a turnaround period for when you come back off of deployment is like a year and a half before you deploy again. But this one was so accelerated, it was less than a year to turn the squadron around, which means we had to train the pilots again on landing aboard the aircraft. So we had detachments that we had to go out on, like to Fallon, Nevada, or El Centro, or wherever that detachment was, again, to spool those pilots back up to be able to land on the aircraft, and also get everybody ready to deploy again. So people would go on their vacation to reacclimate themselves to their families and that kind of stuff, and then get prepared to go back out to sea again. So that turnaround period was like super fast. So it was, like I said, less than a year to turn that squadron around to be able to go back out again to deploy, to go to this war. So in February, actually no, it was, Desert Shield started first. And so I think that was like, a couple months before Storm happened. And so we were that part of the squadron, or part of air wing or what they call carrier air group that got on station in that area in the Persian Gulf. And it, like I said, it went pretty quick. So, so we deployed from San Diego. We did our normal little stop, but those stops were like real short. Instead of being in port for a week, you were in port for maybe 2 days. So the same thing happened from, we would leave San Diego, go to Hawaii, do whatever we do in Hawaii, and then hit the Philippines, do what we were gonna do in the Philippines, and then be out on station in Diego Garcia. Once we got across the Indian Ocean and got up into the Persian Gulf, then, you know, it was, at that point, it was on and popping, I'll put it like that. You know, it was on and popping at that point because the tempo here, regular at sea periods, the tempo is not as crazy as it is during the war. So the operation tempo, they explained to us that, so we had a couple of aircraft that were, tell them I'll call them back. So that operation tempo, they explained to us that we want to have every single aircraft that we have. So all 12 aircraft, they wanted up and operational. So if something happened to another aircraft, once it launched and if it came back down, meaning something was wrong, they would swap it out real quick. And if it was down for a certain reason, like for instance, say like a spoiler actuator went bad, we would have the part like, you know, now you need to remove and replace that part.
I can pause this real fast if you need to take it.
No, these are Juneteenth stuff, so, and I'll call them back. So that op tempo was like crazy to turn an aircraft around if it came back out. Here's one, for instance, like a spoiler, and I'm gonna use this one, a spoiler actuator went down. A spoiler actuator is not the easiest thing to change. So I said what I did was I was really good at, you know, so being able to remove and replace that thing as fast as I could and still do it safely and get the aircraft back up and back on the flight schedule, like within the next, you know, flight, was crazy. You know, normally you would take your time and, you know, you had time to do it, but, you know, the tempo was so hot. We were even trained or certified to hang bombs on aircraft. We didn't arm them because the ordnance men armed them, but they were dropping bombs so much in Kuwait at that time that the ordnance men needed help loading bombs on aircraft. So just doing that part was crazy. Not only maintaining your own aircraft, but also going to help these ordnance men hang ordnance. And then once it was hung safely, then we would go off and then they would arm it and do all the stuff that they needed to do to, you know, get the aircraft ready, you know. So those pictures that people saw where people were writing a message on the side of a bomb, you know, I don't know if you saw those pictures, but we would do the same thing. We would chalk something on the side of a bomb, like, okay, take this, or hello from Sam Gray, you know, or, you know, just crazy stuff like that, you know. And, but they were, I mean, we would see aircraft leaving the ship on the normal operation with bombs on them and coming back with them on it. In this particular theater, in this type of operation, we would launch aircraft and the aircraft would come back with no bombs on it. So at that particular time, they were dropping bombs like crazy, you know, in that area. And our mission, as far as F-14 squadrons, our commanding officer was able to shoot down one of Saddam Hussein's aircraft. That at that time they had a no-fly zone, and so their mission was to watch, and see if any aircraft got off the ground, and if it did, they were assigned to go and shoot it out the sky. So that was their mission for F-14 squadron. Because at the time we didn't have bombs on the aircraft. At the time, there was the E-86Bs and other type aircraft that had bombs on their aircraft that would drop bombs all over the place.
Seeing how you were still in the service, how did you feel when the Cold War ended? 89, the wall falls, the USSR breaks apart. I mean, that was your biggest threat your entire enlistment. I mean, I'm sure everybody was talking about the Cold War, Russia, that's where the war is going to be. 89 happens, and it kind of almost in a surprising way, Gorbachev tears down the wall, and the Soviet Union is no more.
To be quite honest, I didn't focus on that too much, I was happy to see it happen, all right? When I say that I'm glad that, I didn't think that we had threats out there anymore, and Russia was that threat. Again, they would fly Bear aircraft loaded with bombs on them. So they would come out and, monitor, whatever they were looking at, don't know what they were looking at, but they always had an escort, and for the entire time that I was out to sea, in any bombs, any aircraft that would want to fly in our airspace or didn't identify, because they have these certain terms, identify, friendly or foe, IFF, all right? Are you friendly or are you a foe? And if you didn't identify yourself as friendly, then that was one thing. But if you identified yourself as a foe or didn't identify, then you had an escort. So that's the way that worked. So
did you ever have a moment then when you were out at sea that the hair on the back of your neck stood up, like the alarm bells are going off and you're like, this could be them coming in to do a run?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like I said, you would see them off in the distance. You would also see them with an escort. And so you're like, wow, and we have what they call tactical air reconnaissance pods attached to our aircraft, which were these really high-end camera systems that would, shoot footage of whatever it was. And at times, we were able to go into what they call the ready room, where the pilots are, and they would show that film. And so you would be able to see, that aircraft and that mission and blah, 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 see them with a Bear or whatever, aircraft were flying that escort, with that Russian Bear. So that was pretty intense to see it, but, like I said, they never opened a bomb bay door, and no one, had to actually, shoot it down or fly that suicide mission into that Bear. So, and you can see pictures to this day online of those escorts of the Russian Bear and F-14 or whatever, F-18 or whatever, that would fly escort, with a Bear aircraft. So,
when did you get the orders to become a DI?
So once I finished up with 213, I then got the orders to be a drill instructor or company commander from 213. And so from there is when I got those orders to go to San Diego, Recruit Training Center, San Diego.
Was that a night and day difference as far as your daily workload, going from aviation mechanic to training this new incoming Navy seaman cadet. I don't know what you guys call those guys. Recruits?
Recruits.
Okay.
So the thing about that, in any of the billets, well, I'll put these two, from instructor duty to being a company commander, they only wanted, the top 10% of the people that were either in your squadron, or if you're, well, since I was in the squadron, they only wanted the cream of the crop to go to these places. If you were, a mediocre sailor or anything like that, you couldn't get those billets. So I was always top. I got like Sailor of the Year twice. I was Sailor of the Year in my VF2 squadron, Sailor of the Year in 213 as well. So twice I was recognized as Sailor of the Year. That's like top in your squadron, as far as enlisted was concerned, and got that recognition like that. And that's pretty cool, to be recognized like that. So I got the orders to RTC San Diego. So was it different? It absolutely was. All right, one, because we had to go through boot camp ourselves. All right, so we had to experience what the recruit experienced. So we had to go through, fold our clothes a certain way. We had to go through some of the same schools that they went to, just to get us acclimated to what that recruit was going to experience. And so, so basically, that's what we had to experience. Well, how long was that school? I think that school was like, probably about a month long for DI school or company commander school. And so we had to do the workouts, the runs, and all that kind of stuff. So this is what they were going to experience. So, but, I was, like I said, one of those top of the line sailors. PRTs wasn't an issue or anything like that for me. So, well, PRT is a physical readiness test. So you could keep up, with, you push yourself, as hard as you're going to push yourself. And there's only certain things you can do to a recruit anyway, and so as much as you wanted to push them hard and that kind of stuff, there was certain parameters that you could do to a recruit.
I know we could probably spend a whole hour talking about being a DI, but looking back at it, what's the one of the things that a recruit did that was just absolutely funny? That had to test your bearing where you couldn't laugh, but you really wanted to. And I'm sure there was a few times.
There was a few times. So we wouldn't allow recruits to cuss, all right, to say swear words. And me and my co-company commander heard out in the compartment somebody say a cuss word, and he and I just went, just came unglued. We act a certain way, just get as crazy as we want it to be, all right? Who cursed in my command? Who cursed in here? Blah, blah, blah. I want to know right now. If we're not, we're going to smash this whole company. We're going to, do physical training. And then they would end up ratting out who it was that said the swear word. And we asked this recruit to get in the office, stand by. He had a knock, and he stood outside the door, and it was like, enter. And then he would enter, and he would stand there, and then he and I just like, he's in one ear and I'm in the other. And this recruit got so nervous, he peed on the floor. And so we had to maintain military bearing right through that whole experience. And then we told the recruit, you better clean this up right now, blah, 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 blah. And he went, cleaned it up, and he and I disappeared out the back door from the office, and we just busted up laughing. We could not believe it, that this recruit got so worked up that he peed on the floor.
All right.
That he pissed on himself, let's put it that way.
All right.
And so that was pretty funny. But then, you know, you quickly learn, you know, that you are that example, you know, to that recruit. And so at the end of everything, you know, you're kind of like, you know, hey son, you know, I'm proud of you, you know, and you know, you're gonna do good out in the fleet, you know, and sometimes you would share, you know, with them because it's all about, you know, taking them from a civilian setting and making them sailors, you know, and this is what you're going to experience from going to the workouts to wanting your recruits to score high in training because they're moved by the flags that they got on their their guide on flag, you know, from physical training, physical readiness flag, academics to how they marched, you know. So they were really moved by that to have all those streamers, you know, on their flag by the time they got out of boot camp. And when you, what they call pass and review, meaning they were at graduation, they had dignitaries on the podium, and those dignitaries would pick out who was the best company that passed and reviewed. And twice during the time I was a company commander, my company got, you know, designated what they call best foot forward. They got that designation. I was really happy about that, you know, because we really trained hard and they were really precise and, you know, they're marching. A lot of times I would go because MCRD, the Marine Corps recruit depot was right next door to RTC San Diego. And so a lot of times I would sit, you know, outside on base, go on base and then sit outside and watch those DIs, how they would train those recruits, how they marched and how precise they were in their turning and their, you know, movements were nice and crisp, and, you know, and that emulated that for my company of recruits. And so that's what we did. Now I did have an experience where a recruit, it was a pretty bad experience where a recruit, we have recruits that were either got injured somehow, or we call them no march, no PT. They went to medical and medical would send them back with, you know, they needed to take, you know, some time off because they were injured, either their foot hurt or something, they had some ailment. And so we couldn't march them, so we call it no march, no PT. So we couldn't do anything to them, so they had to march separately from the class. They could not be at the training that we were at. So when we were in the classroom, we would tell them to go ahead, you know, or if we're gonna go eat chow, we would tell them to get dressed and meet us, you know, at the chow hall or at the training, or if we were drilling, we would have them meet us on the parade ground so they could actually still see it, but they couldn't participate in that particular aspect because they were no march, no PT. But this particular time, this recruit, I guess he got a bunch of them together that were no march, no PTs. I asked him to fall out and meet us at whatever training evolution we were at. This particular day, we were practicing for graduation. And this recruit came up and he said, I asked him, I said, why didn't you guys fall out with your company? And, well, you told us, and then, you know, just the way he said it was, well, you told us, you know, and I just came unglued, right? And when I say unglued, you couldn't put hands on a recruit or anything like that. And I'm like, da, 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 da. And this recruit, not the same one that peed on himself, but this recruit, you know, got flustered and started backing up, and I'm just coming at him. It's like, you get those guys out there, you get dressed, and you meet us at the parade ground. You do this ASAP, right? So they got dressed, they met us on the parade grounds, and then he wouldn't sit down. And I'm like, recruit, sit down, you know, like, you know, march no PT. And he just defied, you know, it. He stood there, and then he passed out. And when he went to medical, he said I pushed him. And I'm like, I know you and I both know that that's a lie. And at that point, I ended up having to go to what they call be investigated. And then I just told the recruiter, this is the first time that I made Chief Petty Officer. I changed uniforms because I made Chief at E7 at boot camp or at RTC. And so anyway, so I said, if I lose these, it'll be worth it, because I'm about to, you and I both know that that's a lie. I never put my hands on you. And so I said, if I lose these, it's gonna be complicated, because you work so hard in your career to make E7 and all that I've been through, and then could lose it because a recruit lied, So anyway, he ended up recanting his story and telling the investigator that he lied, and then I just made sure, that this kid would not make it through boot camp. Because if you could sit here and lie like that, how am I gonna trust you being out in the fleet when I need you to respond? Like, for instance, if there's a fire on deck, where are you gonna run to? I need you to respond, to commands, because there's gonna be somebody that's gonna be on scene that's gonna direct you to do something, and you cannot run, you cannot walk away. This is everybody's, responsibility to put this fire out or whatever we're doing. Mishaps happen at sea, and there's a bunch of them to talk about. Mishaps happening at sea where you have to respond. And so if you can sit here and tell lies like that, then I personally don't want to serve with you.
Exactly.
And so I ended up pushing him back, and then later on found out that he didn't make it through that second company.
Well, I know we're a little close on time here, so do you recall the day your service ended? And where were you when your service ended?
I was at Naval Air Weapons Station, Point Magoo. So at this time, they moved all the F-14s to the East Coast, and they moved all the E-2C Hawkeye aircraft up to the Point Magoo area. So I went from Miramar back up to Point Magoo, which I was familiar with Point Magoo anyway. So, because I was there in the Antarctic Developmental Squadron at that time. And then, so went from there back down to San Diego to the E-2 Squadron that was there. Then they went to the Point Magoo. So Point Magoo was my last, where I retired from the NAS Point Magoo. At the time, I'll put it this way, we had a squadron motto that says, if you're not having fun, you're not doing it right? So I was not having fun in the service at the time. You're 20 plus years in, and you're like, it's not happening right now. You just, at that point when you just know you need a change, And so at that point, I put in my papers to retire. I had enough time, so,
I know we talked a little bit before, and I'll keep it short for time's sake, but you mentioned going to Antarctica. Could you just talk a little bit about that deployment, what you did down there?
Yeah.
I thought that was really cool.
Yeah, so that was one of the highlights of my career. Again, one, because not very many people get to experience Antarctica. And just to get down there was interesting. The films that we had to look at for extreme weather and extreme temperatures that would be down in Antarctica, and how we had to prepare our squadron to experience that. So my first tour was, and we had, when I say tours, I mean like 2 times that I've been to Antarctica. So half of the squadron would go what we call on ice, would be to Antarctica. The other half of the squadron would be in New Zealand, Christchurch, New Zealand, because it was like major maintenance that you could do on the aircraft, but you couldn't do it in extreme temperatures. So there was only so much time you could stay out in extreme temperatures. So what we would do is get the aircraft ready to fly back to Antarctica and perform that major maintenance on the aircraft. And then once we perform that maintenance, we would fly it back down to Antarctica. So why was that important? Well, because one, it is the most beautiful place you ever did want to see. And just think about snow, ice, as far as you can see, icebergs, you can see, just witnessing that, an aircraft could land on this ice, that the aircraft that we were flying at the time was C-130s. They were LC-130s that were equipped with skis on the landing gear. And so that whole mission was to resupply the South Pole. And because they were people that would winter over. So we were down there during the daytime, 6 months of daylight, and the people that would winter over was down there during the 6 months of darkness. And so being able to land on ice, being able to do the things that we did to the aircraft, being outside, seeing penguins, seeing other sites where aircraft have landed before and have crashed, or we have been to crash sites and that kind of thing. So seeing that kind of stuff was just really just awesome to see. And so the second time being in Antarctica, when I say Antarctica, I mean this part, I was able to be in Christchurch. So this time I was in Christchurch doing the major maintenance on the aircraft and sending them back down on ice. The first time I was in Antarctica, and being able to go to geographical South Pole, being able to go to the ceremonial South Pole was an experience. The what they call it, the science globe, or what we call it as a globe at the time, but this sphere that was down there where these scientists would be down and do all their studies. That's really all this was about, is all these studies about climate change, or different fish, or different, everything was in it. It was about science. So we were able to, being down in Antarctica, we were able to interact with New Zealanders, that they have a base. We were able to interact with other countries that was down there. And again, our whole mission was to resupply all of those folks that were down there. And so that was really interesting. It was interesting to see the Coast Guard cutter come in and cut up McMurdo Station, or the ice going into McMurdo Station, and seeing all that ice float out to sea. And the very place where we landed our aircraft, we had to move them from there to a permanent ice shelf, which is Ross Island. We had to move it over there because that ice, it does melt, but it's like 2,000-year-old ice, that's just built up over time. But this ice, once that cutter came through and cut up that ice, and you see all these blocks of ice float out to sea, and then all these ships will come in and offload all of the trash, or offload supplies, or unload. We would unload trash, offload supplies, and that kind of stuff to McMurdo Station. And so seeing that whole operation was just really interesting. I have pictures from that experience that just really blocks of ice that are like as big as as tall as this room is right here, from the floor to the ceiling. You see that block of ice, float out to sea is just crazy. So.
Well, thank you for sharing that. Real quick before we end here, I would like you to talk, if you could, just a little bit about what you did after service. And then doing those activities, helping out veterans, do you feel that your time in service helped you in that regard?
So because of my love for the service and that I became involved with several different components of veteran help or service organizations. I was on the advisory committee for the Fort Custer. So basically that advisory committee basically, was the advisory for the director for the Fort Custer. We take care of the grounds. We physically didn't, but we were able to raise monies to take care of the grounds, to replace flags, and to have a national cemetery just down the road from here is pretty incredible. So I was on that advisory committee. I was on Calhoun County Veterans Affairs, part of a veteran service organization, the American Legion. I was also part of the West Bloomfield, part of the Tuskegee Airmen, because they were, aviation, and my goal in mind was to also, we have a School of Aviation down the street here, that's right here, Western Michigan School of Aviation. So is to try to get students, African American students, involved in aviation, because that was a love for my life, for the 20 years that I was in the service, was in aviation. So it's to try to get African American students involved with aviation. And no better way to do it than see these, Tuskegee Airmen, the ones that were still living at the time, to come to Battle Creek and allow students all students, because we had them come here to Tuskegee Airmen and have them go through all of the schools, the 4 different school districts in our community, and have students, black, white, whatever, experience and hear their stories, of the times that they were in doing flying missions and things like that. And then, of course, the movie came out, Tuskegee Airmen, and to have them tell, this thing where he flew over and he saw his woman and then she's waving, that's a lie, that's movies, and that kind of stuff. It was just funny to hear them say it, and because there's stuff, made for TV. Matter of fact, the movie Top Gun was filmed on NAS Miramar, and a lot of our planes were a part of that movie, where we would, our corrosion control shop would sand off our decal on the side of the aircraft and put Tom Cruise's decal on the side of the aircraft. So that was pretty cool to meet Tom Cruise. He would be walking through the hangar, and Kelly McGillis, to watch that whole thing just develop and then see the movie, and it was just really, incredible. But my career here, that's the thing that moves me a lot, is to be able to serve veterans. You really feel like you're still part of the service, that just because you took off the uniform, you still have a responsibility to help serve, that community. So being part of the advisory committee, being part of the American Legion from the one post, the Staff Sergeant Michael Dickinson post, I was there from the very startup of that Legion post, being part of Calhoun County Veterans Affairs, and I've been a part of that now for over 11 years now. And so it's just, that's what you do, you feel like you're still a part of, and you still relate to your comrades, your brothers and sisters. I was able to pass a millage here, the lead a Calhoun County millage here to really do that. It was part of the Calhoun County Red, White, and Blue, where we brought the Vietnam traveling ball here to be a part of that. That was incredible. So whatever we can do to help veterans is what I'm willing to do. So you, just because you took off the uniform, you still have that responsibility to serve. So
Absolutely. Well, and thank you for all that. It's I feel the same thing. That's kind of what led me to doing this project, is giving back to all of the veteran community and that. Well, as we get ready to downline, I know we covered a lot over this last hour and 20 minutes now. But is there anything you personally would like to add to this oral history that we haven't covered? Any story that stands out? Any mission? Anything like that you want to put out there?
I'm just really proud of the 21 years that I served in the service. When Desert Storm jumped off, and just watching film, and when I say film, the news of this war, I early on kind of felt like, is this going to be another Vietnam? Is this going to be another war that we can't win, and that kind of stuff? But very rapidly, like I said, being able to see film in the ready room and to see and hear pilots talk about what they saw and things like that made me believe that this is a war we can win. And 21 days later, it was over, and so I was really happy about that it wasn't one of those wars that just went on and on and on and on. And even though, we still had Operation Iraqi Freedom, OE, I was at OEA,
Operation Inherent Resolve.
and so you got all this stuff, all these other operations, and it's still an open, war. They still haven't ended it, because people are still getting the National Defense Medal when they get out of boot camp, and so I'm like, that particular war, I was really proud of how America came together, at the end of the day, how strategic it was, the bombing, and being out to sea at that time, and seeing even some of the footage that they showed on TV. You could say, man, we were part of that, and but anyway, so my 21 years of active duty, would I do it again? I absolutely would, and like we said earlier, when something else jumped off, and I was part of the Fleet Reserve, if I got recalled, would I go back? Yes, I absolutely would.
Yeah, I think we were talking about 9/11, because you ended your service in '99, so roughly 2 years later you had 9/11.
I was actually doing my mom's remodeling her bathroom, and my mom was like, Sam, come see this. And so when I saw that first tower go down, and I'm like glued to the TV at that point, then that second plane hit the second tower, I was like, sign me up, you know what I'm saying? So, yeah.
Well, I do, because I was in 4th grade, and I said the same thing. At 4th grade, I said, I want to join. I'm going to serve in the United States military. And eventually I did get to that point where I could serve. I think it definitely had an impact on a lot of us. Last question, and then I'll let you go for the day. But I want to ask this just because I know you work with veterans and you're so moved with the veteran community. What do you wish people knew more about veterans?
I actually think that people get it, because every time I wear something, either a shirt like this that, speaks to a veteran, or I wear a veteran hat, someone will stop you and say, thank you for your service, And so seeing that and hearing that, I always, I don't say get choked up, but, you just like, thank you so much, Did your husband serve? Or if it's a guy, did you serve? And they would say either yes or no. Or if they said no, they would always strike up this conversation of why they didn't, blah, blah, blah. And so it's always hearing that, means a lot. Thank you for your service. Because I proudly served for those 21 years, and like I said, I'm gonna do it again.
Well, Sam, I want to thank you for your time today. I know you're a very busy individual, so I appreciate you sitting down with me and just having a conversation about what you did over there. I know people in the future will be very appreciative of this oral history. Like I said, you passed a lot of information. You were serving during a time where there wasn't a lot going on, but there also was a lot going on between the Cold War, Desert Storm, getting ready for the global war on terror. There are all these different moving parts, and stuff. And being in the service right after Vietnam, it was a different world altogether in that. So thank you for enlightening us and letting us see it through your eyes. I really appreciate that.
Thank you.